It began as a rumor, whispered between dispersal huts, something only the veterans claimed to have seen. They called it the elevator trick. To the untrained eye, it looked suicidal. A Spitfire climbing almost vertically, stalling, then snapping downward in a controlled tumble that left the pursuing Messerschmitt Bf 109 overshooting helplessly. German pilots reported the maneuver in after-action notes with disbelief, describing Spitfires vanishing upward like ghosts before reappearing behind them. It seemed to defy aerodynamics. Yet it was not magic. It was the product of engineering tolerances, pilot instinct, and a desperate arms race fought in thin air over the Channel. In the summer of 1940, altitude meant life. The Royal Air Force's Supermarine Spitfire Mark I, with its Rolls-Royce Merlin 3 engine delivering 1,030 horsepower, could climb at 2,530 feet per minute and maintain 355 miles per hour at 19,000 feet. The German Bf 109E, powered by Daimler-Benz DB601A, produced roughly 1,100 horsepower and reached similar top speeds, but its fuel injection system gave it a distinct advantage in negative G dives, while the Merlin's carburetor starved of fuel when inverted. In theory, the German aircraft should have dictated the terms of pursuit. Yet British pilots, flying from hastily repaired grass airstrips at Biggin Hill, Tangmere and Manston, began turning that disadvantage into an ambush. Squadron leader Al Deer of No. 54 Squadron recalled the first time he saw the trick executed correctly. "The 109 was glued to my tail. I pulled straight up until the nose hung, kicked the rudder over, and felt the aircraft shudder. Suddenly, I was looking down at him, and he filled my gun sight." Al Deer, RAF Combat Report, August 1940. The Merlin sputtered for a half-second, then caught again as the aircraft right of itself. Deer fired a 1-second burst, 600 rounds per minute from his 8 Browning .303s, and the Bf 109 fell trailing glycol. To the outside observer, the maneuver looked accidental, as though the pilot had lost control, but those who flew it understood the underlying geometry. The Spitfire's elliptical wing, designed by R.J. Mitchell and tested in 1936, maintained laminar flow even at extreme angles of attack. Its thin cross-section and low wing loading, 22.3 pounds per square foot, allowed it to momentarily hang on its propeller in a way the Messerschmitt could not. German pilots tried to follow and often entered compressibility stalls, their slats snapping out violently. A Luftwaffe report from Jagdgeschwader 26 described unexplained Spitfire stalling motions that recover too quickly to pursue. Luftwaffe Technical Note, 1940, Bundesarchiv.
Yet this mastery in the air depended on brutal labor on the ground. Every hour a Spitfire spent in combat required 11 man-hours of maintenance. Engine tuning alone consumed half that time, as ground crews adjusted magnetos and carburetor floats in cold morning winds. Fuel consumption reached 65 gallons per hour at full combat power, an astonishing rate when Britain's aviation spirit reserves stood at only 3.5 million barrels. In comparison, German logistics moved fuel by rail from Ploesti and Hamburg depots, while British convoys were hunted by U-boats through the western approaches. That the RAF kept its squadrons flying at all was a logistical miracle born of decentralized production. Factories in Southampton, Reading, and Castle Bromwich produced 310 Spitfires in August 1940 alone, despite nightly raids that flattened assembly sheds. The elevator trick emerged not from manuals but from muscle memory. RAF instructors at Sutton Bridge later noted that most pilots discovered it by accident, pulling too hard into a climb, nearly stalling, then recovering instinctively with a rudder kick. Flight Lieutenant Geoffrey Wellham, one of the youngest pilots in the Battle of Britain, described it vividly. "The world went silent. The nose pointed at the sun. I felt weightless, then a crushing push as the aircraft dropped. When I leveled, the 109 had flashed ahead, right in front of my guns." Geoffrey Wellham, First Light, 2002. In practical terms, the maneuver exploited a crucial weakness in German doctrine. The Luftwaffe's standard attack used a dive and climb sequence, maximizing energy advantage. But when a Spitfire suddenly went vertical, the 109 pilot's instinct was to follow and fire. The problem was energy retention. The Bf-109's narrow wingspan, 32.6 feet, compared to the Spitfire's 36.9 feet, gave it higher wing loading, meaning it bled speed faster in a climb. At roughly 15,000 feet, the Merlin supercharger allowed brief bursts of superior climb rate, enough to make the trick possible. The difference was small, often less than 100 feet per minute, but in aerial combat, that was the line between predator and prey. Still, the maneuver carried real danger. A stall spin above 10,000 feet left little time for recovery, and early Spitfire elevators could flutter under high stress. Engineers at Farnborough logged structural failures at 460 miles per hour dives, prompting reinforcement of control linkages by late 1940. Some pilots were not so lucky. Pilot Officer Peter Kennard of 610 Squadron attempted the trick near Beachy Head on September 15, 1940. Eyewitnesses saw his Spitfire snap over and disintegrate in midair. The pilot was never recovered. It was an unforgiving art, half science, half intuition.
By autumn, Luftwaffe intelligence began taking notice. Technical assessments from Oberkommando der Luftwaffe advised against following Spitfires into steep climbs unless at least 30 miles per hour faster. Yet many ignored the warning. German aces, confident from years of blitzkrieg victories, assumed their machines could match anything the British fielded. They learned otherwise over the Channel's grey waters. By November 1940, RAF combat reports credited vertical reversal tactics, what pilots informally called the elevator trick, with at least 70 confirmed kills, roughly 9% of total aerial victories that season. The mechanical foundation for this tactical miracle lay deep in the Merlin's heart. Though vulnerable to fuel starvation under -G, the engine's supercharger impeller delivered a momentary torque spike as the propeller disc changed pitch in vertical climbs, briefly producing thrust beyond its rated power. Rolls-Royce engineers measured instantaneous outputs up to 1,120 horsepower during those climbs, a quirk never officially sanctioned but quietly exploited by combat pilots. After 1941, the introduction of the Merlin 45 with Bendix Stromberg pressure carburetor eliminated the -G issue entirely, making the elevator maneuver safer and repeatable. Across the Channel, the Germans responded with the Bf-109F, a cleaner airframe, rounded wingtips, and improved DB601N engine with 1,200 horsepower. Yet even then, pilots like Hans Joachim Marseille found themselves frustrated. In his logbook for August 1941, Marseille wrote, "The Spitfire now climbs differently. If it rises vertically, I do not follow. I roll off and dive." H.J. Marseille, Flight Diary, Africa Corps Archives. The British trick had become German doctrine by avoidance. Behind the romanticism of dogfights lay the mathematics of attrition. By 1942, British factories had produced over 6,500 Spitfires, consuming 27,000 tons of aluminum and 45 million man-hours. Each airframe cost roughly £12,600 to build, or about £600,000 in modern value. Germany's Bf-109 program, though numerically superior at 33,000 units across the war, was stretched thin across multiple fronts. The subtle asymmetry was not in numbers, but in evolution. Britain refined one airframe repeatedly, the Spitfire's successive marks pushing ceiling, range, and speed, while the Germans fractured resources between variants, from the F to the G6 Boyle models with added armor that further reduced climb rate. The elevator trick no longer just outflew the enemy. It symbolized a philosophy of continuous refinement under constraint. By late 1943, with the Spitfire Mark 9 in service, Merlin's 61 engine, two-stage supercharger, 1,720 horsepower, the once impossible vertical climb became routine training. RAF instructors no longer called it a trick, they taught it as energy management. Simultaneously, Luftwaffe reports lamented that British fighters now perform the vertical reversal without loss of power or control. OKL Report, 1943. Standing on an English airfield today, the Spitfire's wings still gleam as though built for speed, not survival. The metal skin carries rivet lines like veins of a living machine. The idea that its deadliest move began as a desperate improvisation seems almost absurd, yet war often rewards those who find control in chaos, rhythm in vibration, meaning in stall. The elevator trick was not simply a maneuver. It was a philosophy born from industrial precision meeting human instinct. In the end, the Bf-109 could never truly keep up, not because it lacked power, but because the British learned to weaponize the limits of physics themselves. The sky was not won by numbers, nor by speed, nor even by courage. It was won by the understanding that every aircraft, like every nation, could rise higher only by mastering the moment before the fall.